In the previous video, we followed the formation of a rival Grand Lodge in 1751 and the moment English Freemasonry formally split into two camps, the moderns and the ancients. What began as disagreements over ritual and authority hardened into competing claims over who truly preserved the ancient craft. In this video, we move beyond the split itself to examine how these two Grand Lodges actually functioned, who they attracted, how they governed their lodges, why charity and ritual mattered so differently to each, and how disputes over degrees, especially the Royal Arch, deepen the divide. But first, don't forget to hit subscribe. The ancients placed charity at the very heart of Freemasonry, making it a core duty of every member rather than a voluntary or peripheral activity. From their earliest lodges, they emphasized taking care of widows, orphans, and fellow brethren in need, seeing this as a moral and fraternal obligation. Assistance was often organized through lodge funds and coordinated support, and records show that ancient lodges actively contributed to relief for families of deceased members, provided for the sick, and helped those facing economic hardship. In effect, charity was woven into the ritual and the identity of the lodge, reinforcing the moral and symbolic lessons taught through Masonic work. In contrast, the moderns treated charitable activity as largely optional. While philanthropy was encouraged and some modern lodges undertook charitable projects, it was not considered a central responsibility of membership, and lodges tended to focus more on lectures, social refinement, and intellectual pursuits. The remarkable success of the ancients owed much to the energy, wit, and sheer determination of Laurence Dermott, who became the Grand Lodge's second Grand Secretary in 1752, replacing John Morgan, and immediately began shaping the Grand Lodge with his characteristic mix of rigor and humor. Dermott was responsible for their Book of Constitutions, titled Ahiman Rezon, or A Help to a Brother. It was modeled on Sprat's Irish constitutions, which themselves followed Anderson's. Dermott replaced the usual historical introduction with a witty, satirical account, even joking about tracing Freemasonry back to before creation. The first edition, published in 1756, may have been delayed until the society secured a noble Grand Master, which they found in the Earl of Blessington, who had previously served as Grand Master in Ireland. It was in the second edition, in 1764, where he contrasted the ancient practices of the ancients with those of the moderns. Dermott's portrayal of the moderns was biting and satirical, lampooning their innovations and joking that their chief Masonic symbols were the knife and fork. The ancients also criticized the moderns for removing explicit Christian elements, such as references to the Bible as the volume of the sacred law in its traditional Christian context, and for toning down prayers and oaths. Despite its divisive tone, the Ahiman Rezon became hugely popular, helping the ancients to flourish. They gained recognition from the Grand Lodges of Ireland and Scotland, who remained suspicious of the moderns' innovations. Rivalry between the two Grand Lodges was intense, and while it sometimes created tension within the craft, the ancients brought new energy and vitality to Freemasonry. One of the clearest distinctions was in ritual practice. For example, the ancients developed a formal ceremony for installing a master of the lodge, whereas the moderns simply seated him in the chair. The ancients also had the office of deacon, which was absent in moderns' lodges, who used stewards instead. Ancient Freemasonry placed a strong emphasis on the moral, symbolic, and ritualistic aspects of the craft. For the ancients, Masonry was not merely a social club or a venue for polite conversation. It was a spiritual and ethical system in which the ceremonial work, allegories, and symbols were designed to teach moral lessons, cultivate virtue, and reinforce fraternal bonds. Every sign, word, and working tool had symbolic meaning, and the ritual was performed with formality and precision, reflecting the ancients' view that Masonry was an ancient and sacred tradition. By contrast, the moderns were more oriented toward the practical, intellectual, and educational side of Freemasonry. Their lodges often featured lectures on science, philosophy, and the arts. While this approach appealed to gentlemen and professionals seeking prestige and knowledge, it downplayed the symbolic and esoteric elements that the ancients held central. One of the more glaring differences between the two Grand Lodges was their attitude towards the addition of a fourth degree. In 1733, the Scots Master's degree appeared in England as a culmination of the Hiramic legend, the central allegory of the Master Mason degree that recounts the death and raising of Hiram Abiff, the chief architect of Solomon's Temple. The degree focused particularly on recovering what was lost in the third degree, teaching that the symbolic knowledge and secrets of Masonry hidden or incomplete in the Master Mason degree, could be recovered through further ritual instruction and moral reflection. In this way, it extended the symbolic and initiatory journey of the craft, emphasizing fidelity, perseverance, and the deeper mysteries of the temple. From England, the degree quickly spread into France, where it played a pivotal role in the development of higher degree Masonry. French lodges adopted and adapted its ritual, which acted as a springboard for the creation of additional degrees and eventually contributed to the establishment of what would become known as the Scottish Rite, a structured system of progressive degrees that codified symbolic and philosophical instruction across multiple levels. In England and Ireland, however, the degree came to be known as the Royal Arch. This change in terminology was likely influenced by political sensitivities following the Second Jacobite Uprising of 1745 to 1746. With anti-Scottish sentiment running high among English Masons, there was a desire to distance the degree from anything explicitly Scottish. The Royal Arch retained the essential moral, symbolic, and initiatory principles of the Scots Master's degree, but was rebranded to appeal to English and Irish lodges. The role and purpose of Royal Arch Masonry were the subject of a long-running debate between the two rival Grand Lodges. Dermott regarded the Royal Arch as the fourth degree of craft Masonry, and under his influence, the Ancients strongly championed it in England. The Moderns, by contrast, were often hostile or indifferent toward the degree. The first major Royal Arch developments among the Moderns came in 1764. When a lodge of Scottish Masons attached to the Ancients switched allegiance to the Moderns and became the Caledonian Lodge. The following year, they helped establish a Royal Arch chapter that admitted members from other Moderns craft lodges. In 1766, with the exaltation of Lord Blaney as Grand Master, this body became the Excellent Grand and Royal Arch Chapter, taking on administrative responsibilities and effectively becoming England's first Grand Chapter. James Heseltine, Grand Secretary of the Moderns, emphasized that the Royal Arch was part of Masonry, but has no connection with Grand Lodge, even as he signed the charter establishing the Grand Chapter. Meanwhile, in 1774, the Ancients established their own Royal Arch Grand Chapter, following Dermott's guidance. Unlike the Moderns' independent Grand Chapter, the Ancients chapter was closely integrated with the Craft Grand Lodge, composed of Grand Lodge officers who held the Royal Arch degree, with meetings sanctioned and proceedings approved by Grand Lodge. For the Ancients, the Royal Arch was recognized as the fourth degree, open only to those who had served as master of a craft lodge. In practice, the Antients Grand Chapter mainly handled administrative tasks, registering names and processing fees, while effective governance of the degree rested with the craft lodges and Grand Lodge itself. By the end of the century, the two rival Grand Lodges had developed distinct approaches. The Moderns treated Royal Arch Masonry as a semi-independent body, whereas the Ancients fully incorporated it into their organizational structure, cementing its status as the natural continuation of the Master Mason degree. Both the Ancients and the Moderns extended their influence beyond England by chartering lodges and provincial Grand Lodges in other parts of the British Isles and across the colonies. The Ancients, known for their flexible and inclusive approach, were quick to grant warrants to lodges in Ireland, Scotland, the Caribbean, and colonial America, often allowing local lodges significant autonomy while maintaining allegiance to the Grand Lodge. Their charters frequently accompanied the spread of Royal Arch and higher degree Masonry, reflecting their broader vision of the craft. The Moderns, in contrast, emphasized centralized control and organizational authority when issuing charters. They established lodges and provincial Grand Lodges in Ireland, the Caribbean, and North America, often placing them under stricter oversight to ensure conformity with their ritual and administrative standards. Moderns' lodges in the colonies attracted elite members and professionals, reinforcing social prestige and intellectual focus. Together, these efforts by both Grand Lodges laid the groundwork for the growth of Freemasonry worldwide, with the Ancients promoting ritual depth and accessibility, and the Moderns ensuring structure, order, and elite participation. Relations between the two rival bodies of English Freemasonry began to soften in the 1790s. This change is often linked to the death of Laurence Dermott in 1791 and the gradual removal of his sharp criticisms from later editions of Ahiman Rezon, though other factors also played an important role. Leadership on both sides passed to influential and energetic noblemen. John Murray, 4th Duke of Atholl, became Grand Master of the Ancients, while Francis Rawdon Hastings, Earl of Moira, served as acting Grand Master of the Moderns, whose nominal head was the Prince of Wales. Unlike many of their predecessors, neither man was content to act as a figurehead. In 1799, external events forced the two rival Grand Lodges to cooperate. Fears of Napoleonic espionage led the British government to introduce the Unlawful Societies Act, which banned organizations bound by secret oaths. Representatives of the Ancients, the Moderns, and the Grand Lodge of Scotland jointly petitioned the government, successfully securing a specific exemption for Freemasonry. This shared crisis marked an important step toward reconciliation. Progress toward full union remained slow until 1809, when the Moderns established the Lodge of Promulgation to bring their ritual back into alignment with that of the Ancients, as well as Scottish and Irish practice. Among its conclusions was that the ceremony of installing a lodge master was an essential part of ancient Masonry. As a result, the Moderns required their own previously installed masters to undergo the ceremony in a series of meetings held between December 1810 and January 1811. Later that year, the Moderns formally informed the Ancients that they had resolved to return to the older ritual traditions, opening the door to serious union talks. Leadership changes soon accelerated the process. At the end of 1812, the Earl of Moira resigned to become Governor of India, and the Duke of Sussex succeeded his brother, the Prince Regent, as Grand Master of the Moderns. On December 1, 1813, the Duke of Atholl stepped down as leader of the Ancients, and the Duke of Kent, elder brother of Sussex and father of Queen Victoria, took his place. Having already united the Ancients and Moderns in Canada, the Duke of Kent swiftly merged the remaining Moderns lodges there into Ancients lodges, effectively ending the Canadian division. Finally, on the feast of St. John the Evangelist, December 27, 1813, the two rival English Grand Lodges formally united, creating the United Grand Lodge of England, with the Duke of Sussex as its first Grand Master. Although the Grand Lodges formally united in 1813, the practical work of unification took several more years. The first step was the creation of the Lodge of Reconciliation, composed of members from both the Ancients and the Moderns. Its purpose was to develop a single form of ritual that would be acceptable to both traditions. Once agreement was reached, this ritual was taught more widely through the Stability Lodge of Instruction in 1817, and later refined and expanded by the Emulation Lodge of Improvement, which began its work in 1823. Through this process, the new United Grand Lodge of England effectively combined the ritual traditions of the Ancients with the organizational structure and administration of the Moderns. The resulting emulation ritual became the most widely practiced form of ritual in England. However, it did not eliminate all variation. To this day, multiple working styles remain in use, all mutually recognizable, offering different expressions and traditions within the English Masonic system. As for the dispute on the Royal Arch degree, the new United Grand Lodge declared that pure Ancients Masonry consists of 3 degrees, and no more. Those of the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the master mason, including the Supreme Order of the Royal Arch. This wording formally recognized the Royal Arch as an extension of the 3rd degree, rather than a separate 4th degree. It became regarded as an essential completion of craft masonry, while allowing it to remain administratively separate from craft lodges. The rivalry between the Ancients and the Moderns reshaped English Freemasonry in ways that still echo today. What began as a dispute over ritual, authority, and accessibility ultimately produced a system that blended both traditions, the ritual depth, symbolism, and inclusiveness championed by the Ancients, alongside the administrative order and institutional stability developed by the Moderns. The Union of 1813 did more than end a feud. It forged a new Masonic identity. For more Masonic content, subscribe to Digital Lodge #1.